Hey guys, and welcome to this brand new tutorial. This time we're going to be covering how to create a low poly magazine. So this is going to be perfect for your game environments where you want to have a magazine just to kind of fill out the environment a little bit. So what we're going to do, we're going to get right into this, and because it's low poly, it's important that we can see the triangle count. So we're going to go over and hit the plus in the top left hand corner of the perspective view, go down to configure viewports, and I'm also going to configure the viewport while I'm here. Just turn on edge faces and get rid of selection brackets, and then go into statistics and turn off polygon count. And we're actually going to stick to triangle count because it is one of the most accurate readings for measuring, you know, the detail on a model. So just make sure you turn all this on. Total and selection is going to be useful, and show statistics in active view as well. So just hit OK, and now we can see currently we're on 0 tries in our perspective view as we have no objects there. So we're going to go and create a box to start with. Now if you're creating a object, then you're going to need to know the actual scale for this object. So if you're going to be doing that, you need to first of all set up the units for 3ds Max. So you're going to go over to customize, you're going to go to unit setup, and then you're going to go and change it to metric and then centimeters. So that's important. And then you're going to go over to system unit setup and then change this over to centimeters too, and then press OK and then OK. And then you'll notice that when you go over to create any standard primitive, you're going to see the centimeters now in the parameter boxes. So before you just had a generic unit that 3ds Max uses, and this is going to be better if you're going to be putting it into an engine such as the new Unreal 4 engine, which works off centimeters. So we're going to go ahead and create a sort of a box, but kind of a rectangular, very thin box that could represent our magazine. So at the moment, just a box which is fairly thin and loosely kind of the shape of a magazine. So what we need to do now is we need to change the size of it to be A4. Okay, so the size for A4 is 21 centimeters, and then it's 29, and then the width would be 29.7, I believe. So that's going to be our A4 page. Now obviously this is a little bit thick for a magazine, and we're not going to set a specific kind of figure for the height. We're just going to adjust it with the scale tool. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to drag this down to make it a little bit thinner. So it's going to be something like this. I could go thinner possibly, maybe to around about here, but that's going to be okay for now. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go and head over to our modify tab, and we're going to go into editable poly. Now once we're in editable poly, we're going to go over to edge, and what we're going to do is we're going to place edges running all the way down the sides of this magazine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all change the color of my object just because it's pink, and not that I have anything against pink, but I just think it makes it a little bit harder to see the edges on the model. So I'm going to go ahead and select one of these vertical edges on the corner and just hit ring on the right, and that's probably the easiest way to do it. And that's going to select every single vertical edge on each corner. We're going to then go on to connect, so we're going to hit the little box next to connect and change the value to 2. So we're going to have 2 segments on this, not just one, but we're going to place 2. And then we're going to go and hit the tick. Now once we've done that, we can simply go to polygon. We can select the middle polygon on the longer end. So we're not going to go over to the shorter end, it's going to be on the longer end. And we're going to simply go to the move tool and then drag that out a little bit. So you can see what we've done there. We've just kind of rounded that edge off a little bit, you know, where the pages would kind of fold over this side and come over back onto the other side. So I'm just going to drag that a little further, so that's going to work fairly well. Don't forget this is low poly, but we'll get a fairly good result at the end of this, I assure you. So we're going to go ahead now and bend the corners, because one thing with the magazine, you know, you could stop here with the modeling if you preferred, you know, but it's just a shame because you want to make your assets look you want them to have character, some personality, believe it or not. Even though they're just objects and assets, you still want them to have a bit of power, a bit of sort of impact in your environment. So we're going to go ahead and just go into edge, and we're going to select the edges over on this side. So we're going to click and drag, so we select the edges on the right hand side, and also hold control and then click and drag over the edges on the bottom just there. So what we've done here is we've not clicked and drag over the entire corner, because what that would do is it would select the vertical edges down this corner as well. And as you can see, as I did previously, just selecting this one first and holding control and selecting the other side will allow those vertical edges to be deselected. And now once these two sides are selected, we can then go on to connect. So we're going to go over and click on to connect. This time we're going to change this option to 1, and we're going to hit the tick. Okay, so at this point here, we're just going to go over and just move this group of vertices and this group of vertices closer towards the corner, and then what I can do is quite easily just click and drag over this area just here, this corner, and just drag it up a little bit. You don't want to go too far with it. You don't want to go up to this high because it's just not going to look right. We want it to be very subtle. So we're going to go now onto the scale tool, and we're going to scale in height, because what happens at the corner of magazines once they've been read a few times and they start to bend up is they start to fan out a little bit, you know. So that's what you want to try to mimic. So what we're going to do then is we're going to go over to the opposite side and do pretty much the same thing, except this time we're going to go for like a different size of cal. This one's fairly small, so I'm going to go over and go to connect. And let's just move these verts over very slightly, and maybe make it a slightly different angle as well, just so it's not too perfectly spaced out like the other one. So let's just pull this across, and let's do something like this, which is just slightly different to the other side, and that's what you want. You want subtle variations, and we're going to drag this up as well, and we're going to scale it up like so. Okay, so you've kind of got a little bit of an effect going on there that makes it look like the pages are fanning out on that side. Now what we can do on top of this is we want to make the sort of page bend a little bit here, because currently it's dead flat just here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go onto edge, and we're going to simply view this object from straight on. You could also go in your top view if you prefer, and we're going to select this area just here. Okay, so we're going to select the sort of ring of edges that flow down all the way down on the opposite side. We're going to then go over to connect, and we're going to set this to 2 because we want 2 edges connected through here. Okay, now if your edges are quite bent, because they can, you know, be slightly angular, and as mine, you can see they're not quite straight, they're a little bit bent. I'll just sort of show you one of the issues that can occur. For instance, if I had this area just here pulled out a little further back like so, and then if I went into connect in a similar way, right, you can see how there's a definite sort of angle to this, and we don't want that. We want these edges to be straight. So there's a really neat trick that we can use to, you know, flatten these off to be perfectly straight. So we're going to go over onto the scale tool, and all we're going to do is we're going to scale towards the edges. We're not going to scale away because that's going to expand the distance between all of those edges. We're going to scale that towards the edges, and we're just going to keep going and going and going, and what you'll find at the end of this is you can see down here as well, it's perfectly straight now. Before it was all bent and curled like this, and now you can see they are straight. We can also repeat the same steps on these areas, so we can go onto vertex and just select, you know, these verts just here, and if you scale towards like so, you can see how that then becomes flat. Okay, so that's a really kind of cool way of getting, you know, a few fixes in, so you can kind of clean these areas up a little bit. So I'm just going to scale that towards the edge, and then that's what it is. So don't forget, I'm not scaling with the middle of the scale tool because that would contract the entire area. I'm just using the singular axes to go towards that particular set of vertices or edges. So now that we've got that area sort of edged, and we've got the new connects in there, we're just going to go over and select those 2 areas, and we're going to pull this up. So we're going to go on the move tool, and we're going to simply drag this up a little bit. We could pull it across maybe this way slightly as well, but you want to just pop it up very slightly again, because we're not going for like an over exaggerated look. It has to be fairly subtle. And again, just because I pulled this over earlier, I'm going to drag it across a bit more just to ease the angle slightly, and that kind of looks a little bit better. I'm pretty pleased with that. And currently we're sitting on about 92 triangles for this magazine, and on every side, as we can see, we are just using quads and triangles, so we don't want to be using any 5-sided or 5-point polygons, because you may get surface issues when it comes to software like Unreal Editor or any other game engine. So that's quite good. I'm quite happy with that. The one last detail that I may ask you guys to add is just on the corners of the pages. You see how it's a very kind of flat area here, and to kind of give it the effect that it's kind of a fanned out edge, what we can do is we can simply drag it across slightly, and even in this axis here you might want to just pop this in very slightly like so. And what we're going to do is we're going to then drag this one and we're going to pop that out just a little bit, just very slightly. And we're going to go over onto this side and we're going to do pretty much the opposite, just because we don't want it to look exactly the same. We're going to pull in the bottom area like so in both axes, just like that. And the top one I think I'm just going to leave, or maybe I'll drag it in slightly just because I don't want it to be exactly kind of the same. So that's going to work okay, I feel. Let's just do a little bit more adjusting. Let's just pull that out slightly. Okay, we'll see what that looks like. So the very last detail that we're going to add is we're going to actually put in one more edge, because I just feel like there's a little flat area here and it should really be a point. So if you think about a thin magazine, maybe like a TV guide or something like that, which is the type of magazine that I'm making, you know, I'm not making a thicker magazine. It's going to be stapled on this side here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply place one edge sort of going through here, and then I'm going to be making it kind of sharper on this edge, because right now we've got this kind of flat side and you know it's just not going to be the right kind of look that I'm going for. So I'm going to go back onto connect, make sure it's set to one segment, and while that segment is still selected I'm just going to drag that out. So we've got this kind of point going on there. Now what we can do is we can even sort of round this off, so we can drag this point up slightly and we can drag the top one down even a little bit if we wish. Now, as I mentioned earlier about quads and triangles, we kind of have an area here, this polygon just here. If I can select that and let's just focus on this area, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So a really quick fix for this would be just simply to go and select these two vertices. Alright, so we're going to select this one and then hit connect. Okay, so what you've done there, you've not actually added any triangles. So if you have a look at the triangle count, which is 96, we've not actually added any. All we're doing is we're cleaning it up, so the triangle is here and the quad is there. So we're going to repeat, we're going to repeat the effect on the opposite side. We're going to go over and go and select those two verts and hit connect. Done. Actually guys, there's one last thing that we need to fix. I did mention a little while ago that we had to ensure that there was all quads and all triangles, no poly more than 4 sides or 4 corners. Now as you can see here on the top, I did completely overlook this area, which is just here, and on the bottom just there. Basically I've got a problem because that is now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pointed polygons. So the easy fix for that is, again, just like I fixed the corner down here just a moment ago, I'm going to select on this vertice and the one down here as well by holding control, and then I'm going to simply click connect. So as you can see now we've got a quad, and then 2 triangles in the corner just there. So I'm going to repeat the same process on the bottom as well. Just going to hold control to select both of those, and then I'm going to hit connect. And now we have a fixed model. We simply have quads and some triangles and no broken polys. Now the next step is to unwrap. So the first thing we do is we need to deselect any one of these selection modes within Edit Poly, go to the modify list and go down to Unwrap UVW. So now we're in the Unwrap UVW window. We're going to go and select Polygon because that's what we want to be selecting, and then we're going to go to Open UV Editor because this is the window which is going to allow us to sort of lay everything out nicely so we can texture it. So I'm going to go and use this Select by Planar Angle tool because that's going to give us more control and more sort of freedom to select the entire top surface without having to hold control and selecting each one. So I'm going to go and change this to 45 and make sure you hit the button just here. You have to select the button, otherwise it won't work. So we're going to turn that on, and as I click there you can see how it selects the overall sort of top area, and I'm just going to go here, hold control and just add a few more bits to the selection. See, it's over selecting now, so I'm just going to deselect that and then deselect the bottom area there. Okay, so what we want is all the polys for the top side of this magazine, and that's crucial. We don't want anything underneath the magazine. Okay, so once that is selected, we're going to go and use quick planar mapping, which is just here. We don't need to go all the way down and go onto any of the projection mapping or anything like that. We could, but this is just going to be a lot easier for us. So we're going to go and select the axes. So for the top of the magazine, it's going to be the Z axis. So we're going to go over to Z, and then that's going to change the template to the same angle as the surface. And then what we do is we click onto quick planar map. And as you can see in here, that has now been unwrapped. It is sideways, but that doesn't really concern me. It is unwrapped, and that is done. So we're going to go ahead and do the bottom as well. This time I'm just going to hold control because I feel it might just be better for this particular instance. And then we're going to go and let's see, that's all selected correctly. Nothing else is selected, and we're going to go back onto the quick planar map. We don't need to change or go back into the axes options just here, which again is to hold the left mouse button, and that will open up this little menu, and then you deselect the mouse on your selected or on your required axes. I'm going to stick onto Z because that is the correct one, and then I'm going to click onto the quick planar map, and that's the bottom of the magazine, so I'm going to pop that just there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this back on, and I'm going to select this side of the magazine. So I'm going to go with the bottom of the magazine, or the base of the magazine where the pages would be showing. I'm going to change the axes to, it's not Y, it's going to be the X axis for this one. I'm going to click onto quick planar map, and that is the bottom of the magazine done. I'm going to then repeat the same option on each one of the sides. So this one here, I'm going to go onto the Y quick planar map. And in fact, let's do this as well, which is on the X quick planar map. Okay, so we've got all these different areas unwrapped now, and now what we need to do is we need to place them all, well, let's just go back into this. You should have nothing left within this square, because if you do, then you've missed something out. You've not unwrapped every part of the model, and you need to go back and repeat some of the steps to make sure you get everything. So make sure there's nothing in here. Now once you've unwrapped everything and it's all out on the side and there's nothing left in this UV space just here where the checkers are, then you can actually hit this little checker box just here, and what that will do is it will deselect, or sorry, this take away the checker from this UV space, which is very helpful because when you're trying to overlay these into there with the checkers in the background, it can get quite annoying. So you want to be doing that, and let's just go over and scale these down. So I'm going to be using the freeform mode just here, and we're going to just loosely scale this down first. Now one thing you need to be aware of is on this magazine in the game, are you going to be able to turn it over? If you're not going to be able to turn it over and you can only see the top, it's just going to be on a table, you can't interact with it, then the front of the magazine is going to require a lot more space on the UV square just here. So what we need to do is I'm going to make it so I can't pick this up. This is just going to be sitting on a desk somewhere or on a table, and this is the front of the magazine, so I'm going to give this quite a lot of space. As you can see, this is going to be huge on my UV space, and then I'm going to go and select the back of the magazine, which we're not really going to be able to see, to be honest. I'm going to rotate it by holding control, and it's important that you hold control when you rotate or when you scale, especially when you scale, because you don't want to be scaling and doing this, because then it will just distort. If you want to be sure that your textures are going to appear correctly, you can go in the drop down just here on checker pattern and then click onto checker pattern, and what you should see are squares on your model. If you see rectangles, then obviously there's something not quite right, but there should be squares there. So this is what I'm saying, if you start scaling without holding control, you can really start to squish these around and mess them up. So it's really vital that you hold control both when you scale and when you rotate. So I'm going to rotate that by 90 degrees, and I'm just going to pop that in very small in this corner just here. Doesn't really matter. And these parts just here I'm going to place at the bottom, so we've got a nice sort of space here for them. So I'm going to go ahead and hold control again and scale those down. So that's done. That is an efficient use of texture space, and it's only going to be a good thing. So once that's done, we can then go on to tools and render UV template. We're going to leave it as 1024 by 1024. You could probably get away with I don't know, 512 by 512, but I wouldn't go any smaller. And then you want to hit render UV template, and that is our UV template. Perfect. We can then save this image. Now when you save your UV map, please be sure to turn the quality all the way up to 100. You don't want to be having this on low because you might get distortion and not a clear image when you load this up. So just a quick note, so make sure you do turn it up to 100. Okay, so here we have the UV map loaded into Photoshop, and what I've done is I've just gone over and I've brought in a image of a magazine. Now I am using this image, which is an existing magazine, which I don't recommend you do if you're actually going to be placing this asset into a game, simply because you haven't got permission to use it. So what I would do is I would actually make up your own make up your own magazine cover, or edit this in quite well, in many ways, so it doesn't reflect sort of the original piece. Otherwise you may land into some hot water, so make sure you just you're careful in terms of things like that. So I'm going to place this in there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the edges. So if you can see on the UV map, we can see all these green lines and the white lines, and they really help us to align the textures correctly. And right now with this layer on top of the background layer, I can't actually see where the edges are. So it's going to be a bit difficult to line everything up. So a neat trick is if we unlock the background layer. So if we double click on the background layer, just click onto OK. We could name it, but I'm not going to bother right now. And now that's unlocked, and we can place that above the layer with the magazine cover, and we're going to go and use a layer effect, which is linear dodge. So screen will work quite well, any one of these in this area will work, but linear dodge seems to be the one that sort of stands out the most. So screen's just a little bit dimmer in some cases, but they will pretty much do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to stick with linear dodge just because it makes those green lines pop a little bit more. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place this, sort of make sure I hit the corners, and I'm not going to worry too much about the distortion, so I'm not going to hold shift to scale. I'm just going to scale this in so it's just over the green lines. Now when you apply a texture in Photoshop, you definitely do not want to be going within the green lines. You don't want to be doing this, else you'll be able to see, or there'll be a gap in your texture, or you'll be able to see the green lines like I was saying. So you want to make sure you're overlapping by a pixel or so, just to be sure. I'm going to go a little bit further just to be 100% sure, and I'm just going to scroll to the top, and I'm going to make sure the same is done just there, which it is. So that's okay, not too bad. Let's pull that in a little bit there as well, and that's fine. For the back of the magazine, I'm just going to replicate the color just here. So I'm going to color pick just like a mid-tone of the blue just here, and I'm going to create a box which is going to be for the back of the magazine. Now again, I'm not really going to be able to see the back of the magazine, never in this game that I may put it in. I mean, it would just literally sit on a table, so for that purpose it's fine. For the actual page where you see the pages, we need to apply a specific effect. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over onto, let's just save this first. I'm going to go and save the texture, so let's just save that, and I'm going to first of all go and create a new layer, or in fact let's just go and select a color tone which is a really kind of bright gray. We don't want to go for anything too dark and not pure white either, so we're going to go for a slight gray. And we're going to create a rectangular box over this area for the end of the pages. So this one's going to be fine. So currently it's still gone blue for some reason. So we're just going to change the color of that again, like I just said, to a light gray. We're going to apply a noise, well, some noise to this layer. So we're going to go over to filter, noise, and then add noise. So it's just going to tell me that I need to rasterize the layer, which I'm happy with. So I'm going to press OK. And we're going to make sure that it's set to monochromatic because we don't want color. We want to make sure that the noise is black and white. And we're going to tone this up quite a lot. We want this noise to be quite pronounced. So I'm going to take it up to about over 300% and press OK. Now you might be thinking, what the hell is this? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over and go onto filter. I'm going to go to blur. and we're going to go to motion blur. And what motion blur will do, that's obviously way too far, so I'm going to set the angle to 0. I'm going to reduce the distance considerably. So what that will do is it's going to give us this kind of streaky line effect, and that's what you want. When you've got a magazine and you want paper, that's the kind of effect that you want to go for. Now that so far is looking okay, but what I tend to do on top of this is I tend to go onto image, adjustments, and then levels, and then I can just bring the brightness up a little bit and then drag the left node across just to bring it down a little bit, so you kind of have this variation where, you know, the bright lines are a little bit brighter and the dark ones are darker. Now there is another way of getting this effect, so I'm going to show you both ways. To do this, we have to first of all create this box as before. Let's just recolor that again and make sure it's set to gray. And we're going to now rotate this so it is vertical. So this is a very important step, because the next effect will only be applied in a vertical manner. We won't be able to change the angle of it, so we have to kind of stick to it in this way. And then we're going to go to filter. We're going to go on to render and then fibers. So we're going to go on to fibers, hit OK to rasterize the layer, and this is like a preview of what it's going to look like. So what happens is, you know, we can mess around with some of these. I tend to drag the strength all the way up and then mess around with this figure, the variance, until I'm kind of happy with the effect where it looks like it's pages kind of sitting on top of each other. And that's looking quite good actually, so I'm going to stick with that. And again, it's a little bit too intense, so we might go back into adjustments, levels, and just sort of reduce the contrast slightly on that. Or possibly, let's just drag the output levels a little bit brighter. Okay, so we're just kind of washing out that entire texture. So that's kind of going to look a little bit better. So we're going to leave it at that, and then we're going to go over and rotate this back. Let's go this way and bring this back down to where it needs to go. Now there's one last step to this. If we notice, the lines are all going perfectly straight. Okay, so there are a couple of ways that we can fix this. The main use, well, the most useful manner of doing this is you can just hit Control T to go onto free transform mode, and then we're going to right click and go onto warp, and then we're going to drag this so it kind of follows the curvature of the UV map. So you see this area just here, we know that it curves up, so we're going to curve this whole area up. It flattens off just here, maybe just lifts up slightly here as well. So we're just lifting that area, and then let's pop this area down so it just kind of curves down again. Okay, so we kind of got a nice little flow going on here, and that's going to be okay for that. I'm just going to make a copy of this, so if I hold Alt, I can literally kind of drag this layer down, and that's going to be pretty much the same for that secondary layer as well, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. What I might also do again is if I hold Alt and then drag this down again, I'm then just going to press Control T and see if I can work it. If I do it in this angle, no, it doesn't seem to be going very well, so I'll just have to warp this a little bit again. So if I just hit Control T, right click and go on to warp, I just need to drag these areas so they kind of go up instead of going down. Okay, so we're just dragging these areas up, because as we can see just here, we've got the angle that kind of drops down, straightens up, and then curves up just there. So that's going to work a lot better. Now to fix this, what I tend to do is I just tend to delete the excess. So on this layer, we know that it doesn't need to go any higher than this. So I'm going to delete all that stuff there, and then that just ensures that there's no overlap on the texture. Okay, so we've got all those areas textured, and what we're going to do now is we're going to go and hide the top layer, which is the layer which shows our UV outlines. So we're going to hide that one. We're going to save this. So Control S, and we're going to go into 3ds Max, and we're going to go into our material editor by pressing M, and then we're going to bring in this diffuse map. So I could bring that in just by clicking on the little map, the little button just next to the diffuse, but I'm going to go down to maps, Now, if you're new to 3ds Max and you are not seeing this window, then what you would have come across is the Slate Material Editor. Now, this is the default. If you've never used 3ds Max before and you're just using it for the first time, you'll probably get this when you hit M. So if you do, make sure you hit Modes and then go over to the Compact Material Editor. Okay, now once you go into there, like I was just showing, you want to click on a blank material, you want to scroll down to Maps, and then you want to click on Maps and expand it, and then under Diffuse Color, you want to just but you want to click onto None, and then hit Bitmap, and that's going to allow us to browse the image. So let's just browse that image. So it's definitely not that folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over to the folder that I know it is, and I'm just going to paste the directory just there, and it's this magazine UV map just there as well. You want to load that with collapsed layers, and then you want to go to parent before you apply this material. Okay, so I'm going to go to the create tab, and I'm going to make sure the object is selected, and then I'm going to go on to assign material to selection, and then hit the show shaded material in viewport. Okay, now as you can see, the texture has applied, and we're going to go and hit the F4 key to hide the edges. And if I just sort of zoom in on the ends here, you can kind of see the effect that we're getting. It probably needs a bit more tweaking, but you kind of get a fairly decent effect here where the pages kind of curve up. And the great thing is, you know how we edited the edges so they weren't completely flat here, we moved the vertices. You can see now that there's a bit of variation on those edges, that it doesn't look completely perfect, and that's what you wanted. You know, you don't want the edges to look square because it will just look fake. So that's a really kind of neat way of getting a magazine done within 3ds Max. And if you wanted to, you could apply some staples, the kind of effects on a texture with staples just there. That would be perfectly fine. But for a quick tutorial that's covered sort of all the main bases here. We've got modeling, we've cleaned it up a little bit, we've adjusted this, and we've unwrapped it and also textured it. Hopefully, you know, you've learned more than just how to make a magazine, but also some really useful skills along the way as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly set this up as a quick render. So if it was going to be in an environment, just to kind of show you what it might look like with some cool kind of lighting effects and stuff. Now, if you want to know how to do this, there is a tutorial which I've already set up on my channel. It's called, well, it's how to create soft shadows using mental ray. So if you want to, make sure you check that out if you want to do what I'm doing now. Okay, so there you have it. There you have your low poly magazine, which is 120, sorry, it's only 96 triangles. Well, you can't really go wrong, you know. It's a fairly good effect that we're getting as well with it, and the texture quality is good, simply because we have got a 1024 by 1024 texture. So I'm pretty happy with that. Hopefully you guys are too. And one last thing, guys, if you've got a little kind of error, not an error, but a surface issue like this, then what it is we need to set up these smoothing groups. So if you just hit and select one of the polys on the top of the magazine, and you go to polygon selection, right, and you scroll down until you see polygon smoothing groups, you can see that these areas here are all polygon smoothing group number 3. So if I select this area and then also this one just here, if I hit clear all and then hit number 3, then they'll become the same smoothing group, and then you'll get a nice transition, and you'd repeat the same process on the bottom as well. So I obviously can't really see the bottom, but I can see that's number 2. So I'm going to go ahead and select these two, clear all, hit number 2, and that is now a different smoothing group. Okay, so you've got a much better effect now, a nice transition in the side just here instead of a really harsh edge, and that is how you create a magazine, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then please do go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned, guys, for some more videos. I'll catch you all next time.